Hey, DMDongo here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're going to be looking at Devil's Advocate, A Guide to Infernal Contracts by Justice Armin. It's currently on sale for $4.95. Now could you just please sign here? Right, now what is this? What is a Devil's Advocate? If you've ever had a player ask, what is my soul worth, and wanted to play out that all-too-important Faustian deal, then this supplement is for you. It gives you all the tools, legal jargon, and collection agents you might need to craft your perfect deal with the devil. It's split into a few different sections, and I'll try to go over all of them in as much detail as I can. The first few sections give you some backstory and explanation of terms like signatory or signee, as in the gullible mortal about to sign their life or soul away. The backstory in this case refers to where contracts come from and why the making of deals is so important to devils. If you wanted to know more about that side of things, I suggest looking to lore around Asmodeus. Jordan with a PH has a great video over on his channel and I highly recommend it. I'll put a link to it in the doobly-doo down below. Then we move on to the components of the infernal contract, starting with the consideration, or what the signee is giving away, and contrary to proper belief, this may not always be a soul, though the devil is attempting to work their way up to that. Some contracts are taken in life years, or others in more abstract things like a person's honesty, or perhaps your control, allowing the devil to take possession of the character for a period of time of its choosing. Now the offer, or what am I getting out of this? And there is a really helpful chart and example offers in what service tier how much said offer is worth any given consideration. The service tiers are a way of breaking down things like, well, a life tier, if you give away 10% of your life, you'll get an automatic success on a roll. But if you give away a lot more, you might get a magical item, that kind of thing. And the service tiers go up, so every deal you make, every subsequent deal must be made at a higher service tier. So, and also there's an extra mechanic in here into play around desperation. For example, if a character is backed into a corner about to meet their end, he gets a very different deal than, say, somebody who's trying to do this in a nice, lit, comfortable meeting room. Next, contracts must have an obligation, or as in the you better pay or else. Fairly self-explanatory, that one, but this section applies to both the devil and the character, so clever characters may find themselves on the right side of the infernal court if they're lucky. Then we get to the fine print, and this is where things get nasty. Devils always try to make deals favorable to them. Asmodeus famously managed to get himself an entire realm this way. This section then lists ways devils can hide those little details, including making the signatory lineage a tiny text itself, arcane and invisible inks, or just whole clauses that appear to be missing. It also gives players ways of deciphering these clues, so not all is hopeless. Now, there are cautionary words here. You are trying to trick the characters, but you shouldn't try to cheat your players, which is a very important distinction. You as a DM are kind of trying to root for your players as their protagonists. You're on their side in some ways and on the opposite side as the other. As I've said in another video, the NPCs can't be trusted, but the DM must be. Now, finally, you need to accept the contract. Usually, but not every devil does this. Some prefer interpretive dance. Others with a kiss. Of course, signing in blood is still a classic, so a couple of more traditionalist devils will use that. In addition to these main pieces, you can add supplementary clauses, additional components that change or alter the nature of the deal or allow some wiggle room. Both parties get involved at every stage of the negotiation, so there's a lot of opportunity to roleplay out these negotiations. Example of things found in these clauses are things like non-disclosure agreements or non-compete clauses, essentially not disclosing that you've made a deal with the devil and making no other deals with either devils or other higher powers who could potentially scupper said deal. Outside of the contract, we get a section on how to enforce a contract where we get our list of usual suspects that go and collect erstwhile patrons, the baggers, bloodhounds, and handlers, all created specifically for this purpose. Then we move on how to get out of contract, which is, as you imagine, not very easy and usually involves either waiting out an immortal devil, terminating the devil holding the contract, destroying the contract and all copies of it, or maybe finding that all-important loophole. Everything quite difficult. Infernal contracts are ironclad for a reason. We then get some advice on how to roleplay these contracts out, what happens when you lose your soul, and what it means to make a deal with the devil at a character level. Like understanding what losing your soul entails and how it affects the character and their character growth, potentially introducing new flaws or different things that inform their characters as they go forward. Now, moving on to actually writing one of these contracts up, and is a very simple step-by-step guide introducing tables of the medium of the contract, because sometimes paper is a bit too drab and you really want to use the bark of a black tree. Quirks of the devils in question, and Latin phrases with each contract worth its salt needs. We now get a few monster stat blocks, creatures you can use to hunt down the signees that try to escape their fates. It doesn't necessarily have to be players they're going after. I can see an adventure where you see this creature chasing down some erstwhile noble, and you interfere, and thus by interfering you enter into some clause in some devil's contract you weren't aware of. And finally, you get a sample contract, complete with fine print, which is a definite must-have. Now, what did I like about this? Firstly, I really like the amount of detail and attention to detail in this. So much lore, history, and background peppered throughout. Information that will really help DMs create truly memorable encounters and contracts. I also like the little additional notes from both devils and other adventurers that really add to the overall flavor of this document. And if there wasn't an example, I would be extremely disappointed. So I'm glad to say not only is there an example of a contract, it's a really good one, introducing what small permanent look like and how the structure of the contract should be laid out. I have to say as well, the art is fantastic and the formatting follows suit. Everything throughout is really well done and put together nicely, and the art breaks up the document really well, so you're not constantly reading walls of text. I also found the rules and understanding of the contracts really easy to follow, and constructing one from this rule set should be a breeze. Now, what didn't I like about this? Well, I would have liked to see more in the ways of example contracts, perhaps some from weaker devils and some from higher, so you get an understanding of the kinds of differences that the more powerful and older devils employ when drafting these up. In addition, there are multiple mentions of the Infernal Court, and that leaves a really good springing off point for perhaps an example how one of these could be run, complete with checks and things you can do to influence the court members and sway the decision to your side. Neither of these, though, are necessary, just things that might be nice to have in the future. Now, finally, my final thoughts and my rating. What do I think about this overall? I think this is a great idea. I think this is something that if you're playing something in the new Descent into Avernus, you might want to have a look at this supplement to kind of figure out how to do these contracts, how to set them up properly, because that's a big major selling point of that module. And I think this does an excellent job of preparing you for how to do those kinds of things. I also really love the just general art and flow of the entire supplement. It's a really great section and really well set up. I would have loved to see more contracts, just more more example contracts, and potentially like a blank, just a nice little handout so that you can produce one of these on like an oldie style paper so you can print them out, just as a nice to have, but it's not a deal breaker as it were. As a total, I'm going to give this 5 out of 5. It's really great for what it is. Yes, it could be better, but I think for an attempt at trying to do this kind of thing and codify the rules for how you set these contracts up, I think it's perfect. So like I said, 5 out of 5 for me. And if you want to pick it up on the DMs Guild right now, there's a link There's a link to the store page in my description down below. Thank you. This has been DM Dongo. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.